I just wanted to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of our Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen Katsi Semiahmoo, Kekut-Kwikwitlem, and Tawasin First Nations. And I'd also like to recognize that we live, learn, work, and play on the land of the Inuit and Métis peoples. They all have a profound connection to the land and waters that surround our great city of Surrey. And they are a significant economic development partner. So we have a journey ahead of us to ensure that we continue on that journey of Indigenous reconciliation. So Surrey Board of Trade events could not happen without corporate sponsorship. Thank you so much to our supporting sponsors, Central City and Blackwood Partners. Our community sponsors are Alstom Canada and the Value Property Group. A round of applause. And our business and international trade center sponsors, the law firm of Fasken, the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan represented by S&F Benefits, Scotiabank, Western Community College, and BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada. A round of applause. Our government representatives that are with us in the room, representing MP John Aldag, Cloverdale, Langley City, is Kyle Latchford. Kyle, thank you. Her Worship Val Vandenbroek, Mayor of the City of Langley. And His Worship Darrell Walker, Mayor for the City of White Rock. I'd also like to welcome my Surrey Board of Trade board directors. They are focused on the future vision of not only Surrey, but also our organization, the Surrey Board of Trade. Our board chair is Baljeet Dhaliwal. Our vice chair, Rory Morgan. Sasha Ramnarine. Mike Spees, and Jocelyn Young. Thank you so much for attending. So ladies and gentlemen, very shortly we're going to ask you to turn your attention to the screen for a short video. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention the Surrey Board of Trade. We are Surrey's city building business organization. Our whole mandate is to support business, bring business into the city. We're one of the top 10 largest chambers of commerce, boards of trades in Canada. There's 450 of us. And this morning, we held a press conference at the Surrey Board of Trade. And it was so important because not only are we a business organization, we're focused on the livability of our city, but also the livability of its residents. And we were able to feature 5 organizations that were doing significant philanthropic work in those that were affected by the BC flood crisis that we still continue to face so close to home, including Surrey. So the Kirpa Collective, the Langley West Coast Pilot Club, the Gurdwara Dashmesh Darbar, and we were also able to give $10,000 each from Terra Terra Humane Society to Maulana Tariq Jamil Foundation and the Islamic Relief Canada Foundation to continue their work and support for those that have been affected by the flood crisis. So thank you so much, and to each of you for ensuring that we are giving back to our communities for those that are in need. Thank you so much. And to tell you a little bit more about the Surrey Board of Trade, please turn your attention to the screen. As one of the fastest growing cities in Canada, Surrey is an opportunity city. The Surrey Board of Trade is the concierge of connections.
Rick Mann from IOM Property Group. I'm a Director of Development and Construction. We rely on the Surrey Board of Trade for a lot of advocacy and research that we don't actively go out and find. Really, like there's things on there that I had no idea about, and I get the email, I get the web link, and it really affects us in a big way.
The Surrey Board of Trade is focused on making Surrey an opportunity city by instigating change at the different levels of government, offering a variety of business support services, international trade support services, and being the concierge of connections for the business community in Surrey.
My name is Rowena Rosati. I'm the Vice President of Healthcare and Innovation here at the Health and Technology District by the Lark Group. We focus on a lot of health and technologies and how we can bring different technologies and innovative healthcare solutions into the hands of clinicians. So there's a tremendous amount of information and support that the Surrey Board of Trade offers to these companies, and it's an opportunity for me to be able to translate what the Surrey Board of Trade is doing for some of those companies and helping those companies to succeed.
If it's in the agricultural sector or in the retail sector, if they're needing a government connection, if they have an issue related to government, we are there for them, and we have a proven track record of success to ensure that businesses are helped.
You know, the Surrey Board of Trade it's a great organization because anybody who is involved in that organization wants to be a more proactive member of the community. So having an opportunity to connect and network with those individuals helps our business become better.
So the Surrey Board of Trade offers an immense amount of support for businesses at all levels, including entrepreneurs and startup businesses. There are resources that help a business that they wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to contract on their own, and it allows those to be accessible, sometimes free of cost. It also creates opportunities for networking.
Whether you're a new business that's just opening up shop in Surrey, Surrey Board of Trade has to be one of your top destinations. It will connect you with a lot of the great minds in the organization, a lot of great minds in the community that can help.
So whether you're a small business or a medium-sized business or a large business, starting out or expanding, we have the connections. We have the resources to ensure that you have what you need during your journey as an entrepreneur. And so, ladies and gentlemen, our whole action plan, the foundation is that education and transportation drive the economy, and everything else flows from that. And that's why we're so pleased to have had our transportation team for the past 15 years. Our chair is Rory Morgan from Kane Shannon Weiler, our vice chair. And we focus locally, regionally, provincially, nationally on transportation issues and investments, making sure that Surrey is at the forefront of government and media attention. And that is why we've had such a close working relationship with TransLink. And I've been CEO, and it's going to be 16 years in February. And I'm just so pleased and honored to be again introducing the new CEO of TransLink because it's an opportunity to reinvigorate transportation priorities in Surrey. We have been starved of transportation investments. You can fit the cities of Vancouver, Richmond, Burnaby into our city limits. And we have a growing population of 1,200 to 1,400 people. We have the greatest number of manufacturers in British Columbia. We're a border city. We have an international docking facility. A third of our population is under the age of 19. So what does that mean to the present and future of our city? How do we ensure that transportation is a part of our economic development ecosystem? Well, we want to hear from the new CEO of TransLink. He is the CEO of Metro Vancouver's award-winning transportation authority. And this transportation authority, by the way, is revered nationally. I speak at national events, and they are always saying what great transportation investments we have made, even though we may not think of that locally. But in the city of Toronto, for example, they look at Vancouver. They look at the South Fraser. Before joining TransLink, he served as Administrator and Chief Executive Officer of the Maryland Transit Administration, one of the largest multimodal transit systems in the United States. He holds a master's degree in public policy from the Johns Hopkins University. He's been a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners since 2010. And is recognized as one of Mass Transit Magazine's top 40 under 40 transit professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm Surrey welcome to Kevin Quinn.
Thank you so much. My goodness, what a warm welcome that was. I've done this for a few years now, and I've never received a welcome like that. So thank you so much, Anita. I really do appreciate that. Let's see if I can get the clicker going here. Let's see if I can do it. Yes. It's always great when that works. So let's see. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for welcoming me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know about you. It's so great to see people in person. Right? Like, it's great to do that. So let's give Anita and the Surrey Board of Trade just a big round of applause for getting everybody together here. So thank you. I do want to take a moment and kind of follow Anita's lead here and kind of take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are gathered on here today, because TransLink really does acknowledge and respect and celebrate the Indigenous nations on whose territories we're fortunate to live, to work, and to operate throughout this great region. And in particular, the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Coquitlam nations, whose traditional territories I'm so privileged to be speaking to you from in person today. We really recognize at TransLink that, in planning and in managing the region's transportation system, TransLink has a really important role to play in supporting reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And as a newcomer to Canada and to the region, I've been really learning a lot about reconciliation, kind of doing my part to educate myself. Our team, this thing keeps shaking at me, is really committed to working with the nations to identify opportunities for future partnerships, and including bringing more Indigenous art to our station, such as The Sea Captain by Marianne Nicholson, which soars above Surrey Central Station and depicts the Indigenous perspective of colonial encounters. I want to note that since moving to the region this summer, and starting with TransLink, I've been working hard to get out and meet the community, to meet with groups like you, to meet with our riders, our employees, and it's been a real pleasure to learn from everybody really on the ground, have those really meaningful conversations, and learn about the communities in which we operate. And no surprise, Surrey has shown me great hospitality every time I have visited. I've had the opportunity to see Surrey City Centre, Scott Road, Fraser Highway, and I was sharing earlier, I'm trying to learn geography as fast as humanly possible, right? And just learn about some of the unique characteristics of the area. These past 5 months or so haven't been particularly easy for the region, and while still fighting a global pandemic, British Columbians have really experienced some of the most catastrophic weather anyone has ever seen. And so whether that was this summer's heat dome that brought on record-breaking temperatures, and deadly conditions, or fires that devastated the province, the ultra-rare tornado that hit Metro Vancouver at the beginning of November, and more recently a series of atmospheric rivers, a term I think most of us had never really heard before, causing record rainfall, major flooding, and very severe mudslides that impacted our West Coast Express, in fact. So we're all hearing those same warnings. We're all reading those same articles, hearing the warnings from scientists who are really linking these extreme weather events to climate change. And of course, how we move throughout the region has a big impact on climate change and our contribution to that. And so at TransLink, for our part, we really believe that sustainable transportation is really part of the solution and is really the key to tackling this climate emergency. And that's why I'm so excited to share with you what's next for sustainable transportation south of the Fraser today. I want to talk about COVID for a second, because while I wasn't here at the outset of the pandemic, it's really clear that TransLink has kept Surrey moving throughout some pretty challenging times. We've supported recovery initiatives and really helped those essential workers travel throughout the region. And we are doing things perhaps a bit differently these days, but the reason behind it hasn't changed at all, to get people to where they need to go safely and reliably every single time. From doing our part by wearing masks on transit to keep each other safe, to trialing new ways of giving customers peace of mind. For example, we rolled out a new antibacterial copper pilot on high-touch areas on transit vehicles. We're working with the team behind the Transit app, for those of you that use the Transit app, to provide bus capacity restrictions and really put that information in people's hands to make those types of safety decisions. But we also played a role in community vaccination efforts by partnering with Fraser Health to roll out our mobile vaccine bus, which visited locations across Metro Vancouver, including Central City Mall in Surrey Centre. We also rolled out our vaccine shuttle program to help people facing transportation challenges accessing immunizations. I've got to say, transit is safe. Transit is still the best way to get around the region. And for months now, we've actually been seeing our customers return to the system, especially in Surrey. So pre-pandemic, I'm sure many of you know, Surrey was experiencing a really robust ridership growth. And routes such as the 319 on Scott Road, which is a future RapidBus route, were growing at double-digit levels for consecutive years before the pandemic. And now Surrey is actually leading the region in bus ridership recovery. For months, our customers have been coming back to transit, and regionally, we're hovering at about 60% of overall pre-COVID weekly ridership. But in Surrey, we're seeing ridership recovery consistently at 65%. And just last week, Surrey actually hit 70% of pre-pandemic levels. So throughout the pandemic, we've seen the highest ridership retention in a few areas, particularly healthcare workers and other essential workers who are continuing to really use the system very regularly. And so much so that we've actually reallocated service from other areas to routes in Surrey that have needed that capacity. And so routes primarily serving Surrey really have seen the lion's share of service increases over the past 2 years. And in fact, we actually increased service on Surrey serving routes by 14% during the pandemic to meet demand, which I think is pretty incredible. Not only have we been increasing service in Surrey, but we've also been adding more capacity by switching out smaller buses for larger, sometimes quieter and more sustainable buses operating out of the Surrey Transit Centre. This might seem like kind of a minor, operational detail, but for our customers on busy routes, this has a big impact. It means not getting passed up because the bus is at full capacity, or it means getting a seat, and so it's really important. I think it's really remarkable to see how much service we've brought to that area, that 14% increase, particularly during the pandemic and when ridership has been significantly lower than service levels throughout the region. So as more and more people are continuing to come to Surrey and south of the Fraser with transition to remote work, growing families, looking for more space, additional service and strong ridership are really, really great to see. But as Anita noted, it's probably not a surprise that by 2030, Surrey will be the largest city in Metro Vancouver by population. And so it's expected that by 2050, the city of Surrey, city of Langley, and township of Langley will have welcomed 420,000 new residents and 147,000 new jobs. Those are incredible numbers. I'm just going to say, as the new guy in town looking at numbers elsewhere across North America, those are incredible numbers. And I know that Surrey is geographically the largest city in the province, so Depending on where you live in Surrey, your experience can really vary greatly. But as Surrey continues to grow, we know that different areas are going to grow at their own pace and in their own way. But regardless of where you are, and as we continue to recover from the pandemic, we know also that transportation emissions are only going to worsen. So, with that growth, we need to support that by investing in sustainable transportation so that people have really good options available to them. At 35% of the region's total greenhouse gases, transportation represents the single largest source of carbon emissions in Metro Vancouver, 35%. I want to note that TransLink's portion of that is about 2.5%. So with one of North America's largest electric trolley bus fleets, a pretty sizable portfolio of renewable natural gas fueled buses, and an all-electric SkyTrain network, TransLink is really already a leader in reducing regional greenhouse gases. And in fact, every year, more than a third of our customers are actually traveling right now on options that provide near zero emissions. So we have a plan to continue to further reduce our greenhouse gases by 2030, and we have a low-carbon fleet strategy that ensures that all of our buses are zero emission by 2040. So here's the thing. Not only does taking transit help reduce GHGs across the region, but the more people who choose to trade in those car trips for transit or active transportation like cycling or walking, that also reduces the congestion that we're seeing and that we're going to see in Surrey. Making active transportation and public transit part of your life and part of Surrey residents' lives is perhaps the most important thing we can do to combat climate change and reduce those regional greenhouse gases. And that's why we're investing in really important transportation expansion and infrastructure projects. And that's because we know that you and Surrey are really ready for more sustainable options. So I've noted that Surrey's population is indeed growing at a pretty sizable rate, and we understand that more and more companies are choosing to locate in Surrey. I can tell you, I've been trying to read the paper every day, watch the news, and every day, every week, it seems like there's a new article about a new company or headquarters coming to Surrey, which is just incredible. And I know that neighborhoods like Newton and Cloverdale are really experiencing some exponential growth. I want to be clear that at TransLink, we recognize that need. And so I want to provide an update on some exciting projects that are coming to Surrey, like our municipal cost share programs. So over the last 4 years, TransLink has committed more than $100 million to upgrade walkways, cycling paths, and roads, including operations and maintenance funding for some major roadways in Surrey. And this investment in infrastructure upgrades and maintenance really benefits your pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, and transit users. And that's because it's really about the big picture, right? It's about improving transportation and providing options, and that benefits everyone. So some of the projects you might be familiar with include adding a protected bike lane on 100th Avenue and some road widening and improvements on Fraser Highway and 32nd Avenue. But we've also been working with the City of Surrey on some bus priority infrastructure improvement projects, like some new priority measures over on Scott Road that will help buses move faster through the region and more efficiently, ultimately really making bus service more competitive with auto trips, which is so important for people taking transit, and also helps relieve traffic congestion. So initiatives like this are important because we know that there just isn't enough road space for both transit and for vehicles at current levels of congestion. And we can make the most out of service increases that we put in place by ensuring that those buses aren't getting bogged down in traffic. And investing, speaking of bus priority measures, this leads me to the RapidBus. So while Surrey customers may already be familiar with the R1 RapidBus that serves King George Boulevard and 104th Avenue, the new R6 RapidBus is also coming soon. It's home to the busiest bus route south of the Fraser and the fourth busiest route in the region. The R6 will operate primarily on Scott Road, serving communities like Newton. And once in service, customers, these RapidBus customers, will enjoy the service, a service that's at least 20% faster than local bus service today, with routes running at every 10 minutes during peak times and 15 minutes during off-peak. And you can catch that bus between 6 a.m. And midnight. But it also features some really good capital improvements that I think riders really enjoy, like more sheltered stops and real-time information. And where permitted, we're also going to put in place some accessibility features such as text-to-audio functionality, some digital bus arrival signs, those tactile pads that you see. So some early works like those accessibility improvements on the R6, those are already underway. With construction in 2022, full construction, we anticipate service beginning at the end of 2023. And thus far, there's been really strong engagement, which is so important to these projects. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this one really brought to life. The big one, I love that little animation. So as you all know, the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain will extend the Expo line, 16 kilometers from Surrey's King George SkyTrain station to Langley City Centre. And what a transformative project that will really improve the transportation experience for people across Metro Vancouver, particularly south of the Fraser, not least by offering customers a fast, frequent, sustainable, and reliable mode of transit. We're going to see some additional benefits out of this as well, like improved access to opportunities like education, employment, housing. It's going to support healthy communities and the environment, and of course support job growth and economic development. Running along the Fraser Highway, the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain will be an excellent transportation choice for some of these growing communities that we're seeing, like Fleetwood, like Clayton, and like Cloverdale. The province of British Columbia is delivering that full 16-kilometer extension in one stage, which will result in a faster and a less expensive project. And with up to $1.3 billion in funding from the federal government, we're so grateful for the support of senior governments in really bringing this regional priority that has been outlined in the mayor's 10-year vision to reality. So major construction on the SLS is expected to start in 2024, with customers enjoying that new service in 2028. And as that in-service date approaches, local bus service in Surrey and in Langley will be realigned to really help connect to the new SkyTrain stations. So the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain is a really transformational project for the region, and I think it's so critical that we all work together to ensure that we're taking advantage of the opportunities it presents to create much more complete and much more connected communities. Surrey City Centre is a really prime example of a vibrant hub that is really centered around transit. Just last month, UBC announced its plans to construct a major satellite campus in this area, and along with an expanded SFU Surrey campus and plans for Metro Vancouver's tallest office tower, these examples really illustrate the demand for transit-oriented communities. What I'm really seeing all around is that increasing access to transit, to housing, and to job opportunities is really being recognized as key objectives for every single level of government, especially here in our region. And that's why we're working with our partners on supportive policy agreements across the region that complement the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain by really fostering those transit-oriented communities through real good commitments to land use and transportation initiatives that are perhaps outside the direct scope of the project but are really important to its overall success. So, like I said, Surrey is growing, and we need to support this growth through really smart and really innovative planning to make it easier to work, to live, and play, right here at home. So thinking beyond Surrey-Langley SkyTrain, we're really getting ready to deliver Transport 2050, our region's 30-year transportation strategy. And I just want to talk about this for a couple minutes because we've been working hard on this strategy for a few years now. You may know that phase 3 of our engagement on this recently closed, where we sought feedback from the public on the draft strategy. And as you can imagine, we've seen some new trends through the pandemic. Some good, like more digital access, people working from home. I'm sure many of you are usually at home, right, working. We've seen a lot more interest in walking and in cycling, right? That's really important, those active transportation increases. But we've also seen some concerning trends, such as increased rates of people driving alone. So our strategy outlined in T2050 entails 100 actions to deliver choice, to the people of Metro Vancouver so that we can meet our key goal of having public transit, walking, and cycling make up at least 50% of all passenger trips by 2050. We have other goals throughout the plan, such as improving transportation affordability and cutting 20% of the time that people and goods are spending on congested roads in 2050 compared to today. And that's all really in service to a larger goal of moving toward a carbon neutral region by 2050. One of the key actions in the T2050 strategy is really expanding the rapid transit footprint across the region. This is a really key cornerstone of it, with 310 kilometers of brand new additional rapid transit. And when thinking about the future of rapid transit expansion, we want to ensure that we get the right mix of rapid transit. We can make a big difference today at the street level, which will make up likely a bulk of these projects. But we've also got to keep in mind the distribution across the region is changing. And we want everybody to have easy access to reliable transit no matter where they are. And I think this is really reflected by some of the cross-cutting lines that you see on the map. And as you can see, we have several lines crossing through Surrey and through the south of the Fraser. And so some corridors that we're looking at for rapid transit expansion include King George Boulevard, 88th Avenue, 152nd Street, and 96th Avenue. So details of what kind of rapid transit these corridors may see, as well as the prioritization of those corridors, is really going to be looked at further as part of the new mayor's vision. Now, this analysis also includes some really key interregional connections, like improving travel between Metro Vancouver and Whistler, Squamish, and the Fraser Valley. This process has been a really big undertaking for TransLink, with the largest public engagement in TransLink's history. And I'll note that nearly 9,000 of our survey respondents were from south of the Fraser alone. So some really good engagement around transportation. And that's because if we're going to tackle some of the biggest issues of our time, we really need strong regional consensus if we're going to have a meaningful impact. So I'll close with just a few thoughts on what's next for TransLink. It's a really exciting time to be here, I'll just say personally, and an exciting time to be in this line of business, because there really is endless opportunity to serve this region better. I've said in a number of these venues that I am an optimist. I'm really optimistic about the future of public transit in the region, but I am also a realist. And as we look forward, I think we've got to be realistic about some of the challenges facing transit authorities during and kind of following the pandemic. TransLink's been operating at 100% of pre-COVID service levels throughout the pandemic, despite only reaching 60% of pre-pandemic ridership today. We've done this to really preserve mobility for all residents through a really difficult time for our region, and to allow for greater social distancing in what can otherwise be some crowded spaces on our vehicles. And provincial and federal government relief funding has really cushioned us to be able to avoid layoffs and continue to operate at full capacity. But with our 2022 ridership projections coming in at about 60 to 80% of pre-COVID levels, we are projecting a deficit for 2022. And I think we can expect a similar shortfall in 2023 without an extension of the Safe Restart funding. So we're going to continue to work toward financial stability for the long run. And as part of that work, I do have to note that we're continuing to have really good, positive discussions with the province on how they can assist us with relief funding in 2022 and beyond to build more and build a better transportation system. Before I wrap, I just want to reiterate how grateful I am to be speaking with you in person today. If there's one thing that's been really clear to me in my pretty short time here at TransLink, it's really the importance of collaboration, of working with all of you and with all of our community partners. So I'm looking forward to the continued partnership with the Surrey Board of Trade, and I'm thankful for the ongoing support of the community that is in this room today. We have some really ambitious goals to achieve by 2050, working together, a more sustainable region, with vibrant communities, with fast and really reliable transit. But I know that we can't do it alone. And so I hope you'll join me in recognizing that now is really the time for us to work together. It's our time to work together to invest and maybe make some decisions that aren't so popular out there, but we know that 20 years, 30 years from now, we're going to look back and know that that was the right decision to make. I think it's time to come together, not just in Surrey, but really across the region as we really unify and come together in our goal of fighting climate change and really making Surrey the best place to live, to work, and to play. Thank you all so much. Happy to take your questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question, please go to the microphone in the middle of the room, state your name, your company name, and your question. But I'm going to start it off while everyone's thinking. And I wanted to ask you, in your experience and with all of the transportation priorities needed to really move people effectively in Surrey and the South Fraser economic region, in addition to government partners, what about private sector partners? We can't only rely on SkyTrain. We need to connect people throughout the city. What are some examples in your career that you've seen around funding models?
Sure. So I know that we're at TransLink, we are working on some funding models that could work in terms of partnering with private operators. I can tell you that in my experience in Baltimore and elsewhere, we have seen where private companies have stepped up to contribute funding, either in half or in whole, to contribute towards routes that serve particular areas. I've seen examples where, particularly in more sort of campus environments, where you might have, say, a circulator type of route, and so you've got, say, a TransLink feeding, having a RapidBus feeding into a particular area. Meanwhile, a private operator may have their own kind of shuttle that is, circulating, that they've again paid, partially for or wholly for. There's some really interesting technology. I'll just note around this that there's some really cool technology coming out, around autonomous vehicles. Being able to serve in this capacity. And a lot of employers, like your Amazons and things like that, are using some of these cool transportation options to actually lure employees in, right? Employees, they come, they say, should I work here? And Amazon or whoever rolls out and says, hey, we've got this autonomous shuttle that'll roll you around the campus. And people are like, whoa, this is so cool. So, let's not discount kind of the role of technology in attracting employees and really seeing that as a benefit as well. Some cool options out there.
Yeah, definitely transportation is part of our workforce ecosystem, so thank you. To the microphone, please.
Okay, thanks very much, Anita. I'm Scott Wheatley. I'm the Executive Director of the Cloverdale District Chamber of Commerce. So my chamber represents businesses in Clayton, Cloverdale, and Campbell Heights. Now, today before I came for lunch, I said, well, let me just check something. How long would it take for one of my members in Campbell Heights to come to this luncheon by bus? It was 90 minutes. It's a 20-minute drive. It's actually would be less time to ride my bicycle to come for lunch today than it would be to take a bus. So then looking at the 2050 plan, there is no consideration for Campbell Heights at all. We have a new hospital going in Cloverdale. We have probably by 2050, 40,000 people a day needing to get to work their jobs in Campbell Heights. So my challenge is, how is TransLink going to be able to take care of those people and get them out of their cars?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's a great question. So let's see. So first, I just want to take a minute and just acknowledge that we're aware that communities like Campbell Heights are growing very fast, and that we've got to meet that challenge. We've got to provide the right type of service to get people to work, to give people options, and I think Campbell Heights has service right now that's coming every 30 minutes, so no surprise that it's taking so long to come, right? You better time that right, and if you miss that bus, you're in big trouble. So a couple thoughts. So one, a lot of times when you see service to certain areas, it may not be brand new service. You can do a lot of adjustments in route frequency and time of day. So for example, if it's a heavily industrial area that has shift times, transit agencies can work with a lot of employers to meet those shift times. So let's provide, instead of every half hour, 24 hours a day, let's do, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. every 10 minutes, right? Let's take those peak hours, and maybe the employers, back in Baltimore, I was working with this one area with a variety of industrial areas, and they, all the employers realigned their shift times in recognition of a better transit service, and we had a great partnership in doing that. So, service today, I think we can see improvements by working together and better understanding the needs that are out there, and so I'm absolutely open to doing that. I want to recognize secondly, I want to recognize the financial and kind of funding constraints that we're under right now, right? So while Surrey is really leading the way in pre-pandemic ridership recovery, regionally we're at about 60% recovery. And so with transit fares making up about 35% of our budget, you can imagine our revenues are down. And so at the Board of Directors and Mayor's Council meetings last week, I had announced that we are right-sizing our service, and we're seeing a 2% reduction in service right now. So to be clear, that means that 98% of service remains completely untouched. So needless to say, when you take a look at that funding, we're not sitting here in a position today to roll out new routes to places like Campbell Heights. I want to be clear, though, that COVID is a blip on the radar, right? We're all going to look back in 10, 20 years and see this for what it was, which was, a little asterisk. And our transit future is not determined by where we are today, but by doing some of the planning today and recognizing that the funding is going to be available. We've got a lot of work to do on funding as well. Not just the fare revenue piece, but also we know the gas tax is a declining funding source. So I think our models right now are showing that out in 2030, we're going to have $90 million less per year. All of us see those electric vehicles that are out on the road today. And so our ability to provide new service, to increase frequency to those needed areas that are growing absolutely at a rapid rate also relies on us having the funding to be able to respond. And so we are working with the provincial and federal governments, our senior partners, on that funding to be able to do that, so that we're sitting here, you and I are sitting here a few years from now, and you get up at the microphone and you say, "Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. You heard us. You rolled out that good service. We're meeting the frequencies, and we're in the right place." We're not there today. We're not at the position to do that today, but I guarantee you in a few years we will. So I wouldn't go that far, but I appreciate your comment.
Ken Bicknell, AdTrack Media. Welcome to Vancouver.
Thank you.
Question I have, my company does business around the world with transit authorities.
Yeah.
And we see in many jurisdictions the rapid use of triple Ps, like the Canada line, to accelerate expansion.
Yeah.
And so I've always been curious why in Canada we see, Vancouver, very geographically dispersed city that needs accelerated SkyTrains. Why not utilize that triple P model more and have more infrastructure build on other people's expense and take it back in 40 years?
Sure. So, so back in Maryland, I had some experience with public-private partnerships, and so that can be a model that's used. It's not appropriate for every project. My new, I'm learning all these new Canadian expressions, right? So, so gong show. Are you familiar with this? This is a great expression. The other one that I think is more British is horses for courses. Are people familiar with this one? No one knows this. It's like a British thing. Someone said it, and I was like, oh, that's so Canadian, but it's not. So, so the way that I look at the use of P3s is horses for courses, right? It's different funding models and different structures for different projects, and so I know that part of our evaluation is a variety of different delivery models. I think there's some real good success here in the province of the provincial delivery of projects. We've seen that, but it's sort of on the table. But it depends on the project. It's very project specific, I think.
Kevin, how are you working with municipalities to ensure that there's bus pull-out lanes We have an annual Surrey Road Survey. We're going to be releasing it at the end of January with BC's Transportation Minister. And congestion continues in Surrey. People are moving to electric vehicles. They're stuck behind a bus. But we need the cities to really invest in bus pull-out lanes to ensure efficiency in people traffic.
Yep. So, so by bus pull-out lanes, are you also referring like dedicated bus lanes, that kind of thing? Yeah, absolutely. So let me just take a minute to talk about T2050, which I think provides kind of a good model for this. So, you know, three main aspects of Transport 2050. One is a real focus on people-first streets and on pedestrians, because pedestrians have to have a really good environment to begin as a transit. They often say, you know, every transit user begins as a pedestrian. And so you've got to be sure you nail that walking piece of it, right? You got to be sure you have good sidewalks and sidewalk infrastructure. Another piece is you know, clean multimodal options for people. And so part of Transport 2050 involves the rollout of an 850-kilometer bikeway network. I think that's a really key piece of it. And the third piece is active and reliable transportation that people can count on every time that's coming frequently. And I think a key piece of this is dedicated bus lanes. You know, we have built our communities for far too long and based them on standards for vehicle throughput, not person throughput. If we built it for person throughput, I guarantee you there'd be dedicated lanes everywhere, because a bus just mathematically moves people so much better and more efficiently than cars. And the more people that we get on transit, the more I think that makes sense to employers as well as to the businesses that maybe are losing some parking spaces. There have been a lot of studies done that have shown that the introduction of dedicated bus lanes doesn't result in loss of business or in loss of customers. So I did want to say that to this group. Maybe that's a little controversial. But we do need to roll out you know, more dedicated bus lanes. It helps, you know, again, our person throughput, people getting through traffic. It takes people off the road. It shows that transit is reliable and competitive to auto traffic. And I think we've got to invest in those things. They're also really low cost, right? The amount of money it costs to paint dedicated bus lanes is just minuscule compared to building a new rail line, for example. And so if the idea is get transportation options that are reliable and fast and look to implement quickly, dedicated bus lanes are best bang for your buck.
The challenge that we have in the region is that transportation is politicized. And so we have an election next year, municipal elections in October. And what if the plan changes again? What is your perspective and your experience around sustainable transportation investments?
Sure. So, so I do understand that, you know, as I'm new and I've gotten the lowdown on the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain, understanding the history of the project. You know, I think politics, I'll just say, are maybe always going to play a bit of a role, and maybe that's okay. In certain circumstances, I think that it can be a benefit. For our part at TransLink, we focus on data, right? We're taking a look at land growth patterns and ridership and ensuring that regions are growing in healthy ways. From a political level, you know, we have the Mayor's Council that takes a look regionally, and so TransLink is a regional entity that's focused, you know, ensuring that the region is as best served as it can. And so politically, you know, there are some benefits to having that Mayor's Council to better understand local priorities and local needs, and working with this community as well. But you know, there may be no getting out of that situation that politics will play a role.
Hi there, Alex Wright from Anthem Properties. It seems like much of this, your constraints come back to the issue of funding. Sure. Since the recent climate events that you alluded to at the beginning of your address today, have you noticed a shift as far as the metrics or the thinking of some of these key decision makers and the more senior levels of government? Because if you look at, for example, the damage that's being done to Abbotsford or the damage that's being done to the various highways, that far eclipses the cost of adding another SkyTrain line somewhere in the Lower Mainland, right? And because I think, and I think the gentleman earlier spoke to it, It's a lot to ask an individual to add an additional hour on their commute to get to the place they need to go to work, to study, to live. And if you can shrink that gap, like I take the SkyTrain, I think my commute is 5 minutes longer by taking the SkyTrain, right? And that's an easy decision for me to make, right? I take the SkyTrain because it's the right thing to do, right? But you need to make that math a little more palatable, I think, for kind of everyone, for us to, as a group, get there. So have you noticed a shift recently? Are people aware that the math really is in the favor of pouring more money into infrastructure in order to prevent these cataclysmic events that are going to cost billions or tens of billions to repair?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main shift that I've seen in conversations that I've had is a recognition that climate change is real and is happening now. And I think there's a recognition that transit is how we're going to get there. You know, the province recently released their Clean BC plan that has some pretty big goals, like 30% mode share by 2030. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I think we all know the role that transportation emissions has on climate change. And in a way, we've got to both invest in that, say, infrastructure repair caused by the flooding, and we've got to invest in transit because we know that's part of the solution to it as well, right? There's a couple of keys to that. Part of that is, resiliency, right? And ensuring that all of our systems can't go down in a flood, right? That we have stations that are resilient, that we have systems, that we have bus systems throughout that are resilient. But we've got to invest in both. I think the shift that I've seen is climate change is real, and we've got to invest. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Kevin, we have in Canada, the federal government over the next 3 years has indicated 600,000 newcomers to Canada, 400,000 international students over the next 3 years. And in the past, many of them have resided in the main urban areas within our nation, and Surrey is one of them. And how are you ensuring, and they're part of our workforce as well, how are you ensuring you're communicating to different multicultural groups about the transit opportunities, the transit assets that exist and that will exist?
Sure. So I think, as it relates to engagement, it's so important to connect with people in a variety of ways, whether that's, social media, in print. Everybody kind of accesses information in a different way. But it's also key, and something that we've done as part of T2050 is different languages. Being sure that those languages are well represented in our engagement strategy. That's a key piece of it. I can say from some of my experience in Baltimore, there was a large Russian population. When you hear Baltimore, I doubt you think Russian, right? And there was. And so we had to have interpreters for an area that we didn't really know we had until we went out and talked to people and did some surveys and learned that. So, I know our communications team has done that and is really focused on being sure that we're speaking to people in their native languages and being sure that we have interpreters available where we can. So I think that's really important.
And in Surrey, we have 104 different languages that are spoken here. So just amazing multicultural community. My last question to you is, can you expand upon TransLink's responsibility on road improvements? I don't think a lot of our business community members understand your role.
Sure. So TransLink has, I think, 5 bridges under our sort of purview, as well as we oversee the major road network. And so it's really important to us, also from a freight movement perspective, that is all moving efficiently and well. And so we do oversee that aspect. I think we've seen throughout this pandemic how important it is that freight is moving quickly and efficiently throughout the region. I know, so I'm a newcomer. I've recently ordered a bunch of furniture for my kids, so they have a bed, right? And that's not coming for like 4 or 5 months. And so we're seeing, as a result of COVID, labor shortages, things nationally and internationally, that freight is being hung up. And so, our freight system has to be moving efficiently if it's going to meet all the demands that we're all having these days. Yeah.
Hi, Kevin. My name is Karen Reed. I'm with Surrey Crime Prevention, and I'm going to talk about public safety.
Sure.
So I know that Transit Police has been very responsive to a number of issues that have happened on the various transportations with TransLink. I just wanted to know, is there any plan to expand? I know because of the expansions of the current lines that are in place, what kind of optics does that look like with respect to the expansion of transit police to ensure public safety?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I had the same question when I got here because I wanted to be sure that as we expand, we're expanding our police force, and so sure enough, we are. With all of our transit expansions, that includes an expansion of the police force. I don't know the exact number offhand, but I know it is several officers kind of per kilometer. There's kind of a formula associated with that. I do know that, sitting here today, there's a neighborhood police officer for Surrey that really engages with the community on specific concerns. We've been happy to work with you on some of those issues, and we'll continue to do that. And so as as that team grows, we'll certainly be introducing them and working with you and identifying any other issues that we have out there. So yes, absolutely, as the system grows, the police force will grow as well.
Sorry, I have a second question. Does TransLink play a role or in advocating for what it feels is kind of an appropriate level of density or uses at the stations? I'm thinking of some existing SkyTrain stations, for example. I'll pick on the Nanaimo station in Vancouver that just seem really underutilized, and you have this fantastic piece of infrastructure with the SkyTrain and everything is capable of, but you don't have very many homes or businesses or even shops in that area. And I'm just wondering whether TransLink does in fact play a role in that, or whether that's left to senior levels of government other than TransLink.
Sure. So we have supportive policy agreements that outline, our commitments when those types of big investments are going in. So we have them for the Broadway subway project. We have it for Surrey-Langley SkyTrain, I believe, and that does outline a series of commitments that we expect from local municipalities from a land use, density, affordable housing perspective. All of those things that we know contribute. Some of them, I think are more specific than others, but in general, it really outlines what we want to see that community be and how we want to see it built out. It's really critical. I've got to say, this is an area that I think this region has done a pretty good job of in terms of building up some density around transit. And you all might look at that and say, Kevin, you're crazy. We haven't done a good job of this. But I promise you, compared to the United States, it's really quite remarkable, some of the investments and the tying of land use and transportation, which is so critical to building good communities, to ensuring that transit itself is successful. You've got to have that density to make it work and so people are using it. So absolutely, we do have those policies in place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? One more.
Hello, Rafael with the city. One quick question, Kevin. One of the challenges that we have in the city right now is that it's been designed to be kind of a suburb of Vancouver, right? And it's becoming a city of its own. So part of the concerns that we're hearing is about we need to start changing in a way that we use transit so we have really good internal transit services. And I know we have some challenges with funding, but how do we start to transform that? So it's not just to shipping people to Vancouver, but to make sure that we have really good internal connections within the city.
Yeah.
When you compare Surrey, we are bigger than London, Ontario. And I'm not sure if we have a better transit system than London, Ontario. So I think that's part of the things that we really need to start thinking. Right now, a transportation plan, we're trying to address that, but at the end of the day, transit will really depend on TransLink to have that level of supply. But it's not just SkyTrain, it's overall many options of different transit. So yeah, you just want to hear how we're going to try to get to that point, that Surrey is a city on its own.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I would say, south of the Fraser. So we have really good transit connections within south of the Fraser.
Sure. So I guess there are many regions all around North America that are going through very similar changes as we're seeing here and that Surrey is going through. And I would call it kind of the not all roads lead to Rome anymore situation, right? So in the past, in a lot of cities, they've been built up. Vancouver is a good example of this, right? Where the transit system is built to kind of feed in, right? It's built on kind of a traditional hub and spoke model where everything is feeding in. All roads lead to Rome, right? what we're seeing is these pockets pop up. And again, this isn't just in the Vancouver region, but you know, all over the US and Canada especially, where there are these new pockets of economic activity that are growing up. And Surrey's a significant one, right? And so I think what it really retakes is a rethinking of the framework, right? It's a rethinking of the model that's been used for generations, where recognizing these new areas, or not like Surrey's new, but these areas as city centers in and of themselves, right? That Surrey in and of itself needs its own kind of transit ecosystem created. And it can't just be a feeder, right? It just can't be a feeder anymore to a larger, to another area. So I can say that, you know, I think T2050 does a good job of this, of recognizing the need for rapid transit options in a variety of areas that aren't just kind of feeding one or two different areas anymore. But it's again, that's what you've kind of put your finger on, is really nailing a model that's changing all over the world. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kevin, the Surrey Board of Trade, we look forward to working with you and, of course, the TransLink team, who we're very familiar with. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Kevin Quinn.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, just a couple of concluding remarks. Again, thank you to our sponsors. They are our supporting sponsors, Central City and Blackwood Partners, our community sponsors, Alstom Group and the Value Property Group, and of course, our business center sponsors, as mentioned at the top of the program. A round of applause for our amazing sponsors. We have two more events before we wrap up 2021. On Thursday morning, 11 a.m., we have the exclusive opportunity for Board of Trade members to meet with and speak with the Deputy Governor for the Bank of Canada. It's all about monetary policy, investing in our businesses. What does the future hold? And then on December 14th, of course, is the president of UBC speaking right here at 12.